Can you believe that in modern day Australia, women, right, women who get together, congregate and hold a rally or hold a protest to discuss their issues, to discuss their rights being under attack, are labeled far right extremists and Nazis, right? That's what's happening right now in Victoria. And it's just completely ludicrous that even Conservatives, the Liberal Party, have actually denounced one of their own members for actually just speaking at this rally and sharing the words of one of her Muslim friends about how she feels like her rights are under threat in Australia, right? Now, I was at that rally on Saturday covering it, live streaming, and I live streamed almost 2 hours of that rally. And unlike the media and the politicians who are making comments about this because of the grotesque scenes that they've seen on TV and so on and on social media, I was actually able to walk around and kind of film everything that was happening around me. And, from my understanding of what I saw, I can tell you straight out that the women that were involved in that rally were not linked in any way whatsoever, right, to those far right neo Nazis or whatever they're being called, right? They weren't linked to them at all. And it wasn't even a part of the event that they were holding, right? Now, it's very easy to see why the media and politicians would not want to hear from these women, and they're more than happy to just label them without actually giving them the opportunity to speak for themselves, right? A lot of the reporting that we've seen in the media so far has focused on the opinions of trans rights activists, because, of course, the women were talking about them. Fair enough. It's focused on the opinions of politicians and people from different organizations who are worried about Nazi symbolism in Victoria and in Australia. That's all legitimate and all fair enough. But a lot of the reporting has actually not spoken to the women at the center of this rally and even shown the issues and the topics that they were covering, right? They've just completely just said, hey, look, let's just portray these women as far-right extremists. Let's call them Nazis. Let's bunch them in together with these men and not try to understand what actually happened that day, right? How complex it was that day in terms of all the different movements that gathered around these steps for all sorts of different reasons, right? The media and the government and the politicians, right? And activists. I don't blame the activists for promoting their particular ideology or trying to discredit the women that were there. That's what they were doing on the day of the protest as well, right? The trans rights activists that gathered to counter protest the women that were there to speak about their rights. That's why they were there. So, of course, naturally, for them, it works to say that these people are all Nazis, right? But for the media and the politicians, they can show a bit more discernment, right? They can look at what happened and figure out actually these neo Nazis that came and did these salutes and all these gestures, they weren't a part of this women's rights movement, right? This let women speak protest that was being held on those steps, right? To infer that just based on some visual things that people saw on TV or on social media is just crazy for the media and politicians. I'm not saying for general discussion online and people saying my side this and my side that and I'm correct and this side are bigots and so on. This naturally happens. But why is the media doing it? And why are politicians doing it? And why, in particular, the Liberal Party, right? Conservatives, right? Denouncing one of their own members of parliament who attended this rally to speak on behalf of her Muslim friend who was too afraid to be there, right? To share general concerns that maybe other women in this country might have about men or trans men being in their bathrooms or playing in their sports. This is a discussion that we're having in our society. So of course it's only natural that women would want to get together that are against these types of things and hold a talk or hold a rally or hold a protest, whatever you want to call it. Right. And in Australia, in a democracy like Australia, then it's only natural that you would have counter protesters like these trans rights activists that turned up to say, hey, these people are full of hate. Right. This happens in a democracy. Right. And in the middle of all of that, you have the police. Now, as far as I know, my understanding is that these women's rights protesters that were speaking out against trans males in bathrooms and all this kind of stuff, and asking for women-only spaces and asking for safety. They had gotten permission from the police to be there. That protest had had full permission, and that's why the police were there to protect that protest. But what we saw, right, what I saw being there was, as soon as that kind of, the protest or the rally got underway for the women's rights thing, you had this other group move in, right, which were the counter protesters, now the trans rights activists. Then you also had another group come in, which were these neo-Nazi group, about 15 to 20 of them, these men clad in black shorts and tank tops and, masked up. And these were doing salutes and doing all sorts of stuff with a banner, right? Separate to the women's rally. And then you also had, which I saw earlier on, this larger group of people from, I think, the Socialist Alliance, this Antifa, let's say the far left in Victoria, gathering in Carlton Gardens and then walking up pretty much a few minutes after the neo-Nazis appeared, to counter them. So you had these four kind of distinct groups in that area, all there for different types of reasons, right? The only one that was kind of very clear to me in terms of reasons was the women's rights rally, and then the counter protesters, the trans rights activists countering what they were doing, right? The neo-Nazis and the Socialist Alliance, the Antifa people, whatever, there's just a mix of people there. They were just going at each other, right? They were literally going at each other. That was like on the peripherals of what was happening. And, initially when I was there, the police had actually, surrounded all of the groups in some sort of cordon, right? The neo-Nazis were separated from the Antifa people. The trans rights activists were separated from the women's rights people. So everyone was kind of separated at the initial onset of this. But for whatever reason, Victoria Police then, right, decided to allow the neo-Nazi group, those men clad in black, to get closer and closer to the women's rights rally, right? That's literally what happened. They loosened their security cordon around that. Those men got closer and closer. And they didn't fully go in towards the rally. They just got, very close to it. And then they went onto the steps of Parliament. They were posing for photos, throwing salutes, doing all sorts of stuff, right? While the police were there watching on. Of course, all of this was agitating the Antifa Socialist Alliance people that were yelling at the Nazis. I was there in the middle of that, capturing both sides. So these guys are going off at each other. And, in that time, I was missing out on what was happening in the women's rally because you couldn't hear or see what was happening in that rally from that perspective, right? So it's very important that you understand that these people were going at each other and they were there to go at each other, right? Now, I was luckily able to get around and move around and capture a bit of everything. And what's really happening was the women's rights people, they were in their own little bubble there, having their rally, because they had speakers, they had their own security. They had to at one stage have a cordon of women, of different ages and whatever, just kind of guarding them, because the trans rights activists were continuously breaking police lines in small groups, infiltrating that protest, trying to take the mic, doing all sorts of, theatrical displays, which were captured on my live stream, and you might have seen it already. So there was this kind of chaos that was happening at that time. And a lot of the women, from their perspective in that rally, wouldn't have been able to tell what was happening on the sidelines, particularly the people involved in organizing that rally. I mean, unless they were walking around or people were feeding them information, they wouldn't have known who these people in black were, or who these, who were the trans rights activists, who were the people invading their space. It was a very chaotic type of scene. But what I want to make clear is, right, the only people that, as far as I understand, had the permit or the permission to have a protest on the steps of Parliament or near that area, or had gotten permission from police, for that particular location was the women's rights rally, right? They were in their space, having their talks, having people talking, and in that crowd, there were women, there were men, there were people from the gay and lesbian community. So there were all types of people listening in, and it was pretty tame within that group. I'm talking about people's demeanor, of course, just listening to what's being said. Now, the trans rights activists, they came there for the specific purpose of disrupting, right? Disrupting the women's rights rally and silencing them or intimidating them or whatever it is, or they just came to have their voices heard and say that this is a hate-filled, bigoted event that's happening. And look, fair enough, in Australia, people can counter protest. What they shouldn't be allowed to do, and what the police should be protecting the women's rights protest from, and what I've seen very little commentary of, is the fact that these people, right, these trans rights activists, kept infiltrating the space of this women's rights rally, right? These trans men sometimes came in there and tried to, I would say, intimidate them, right? Create unsafe environment. One point, an ambulance came, a few people got knocked over. Like, it was hectic in there, right? And that has not been condemned. That has all been glossed over because on the outer peripherals, you have this neo-Nazi group, these men who have come there just to hijack the whole thing, right? To put on a very public display of all the stuff that they want to espouse to the public in Australia on this large platform now that they've been given. They're there just hijacking the entire thing. You think they care about the women's rally? I mean, people are making that this assertion that somehow they're connected. Look, they had their own megaphone. They were yelling their own things. They were talking over the women. Like, it was completely disrespectful if you think that these two groups were together. No, this was an ideological fight on many different fronts for these people. And the fact that, these activists on the other side, the trans rights activists or the Socialist Alliance, the far left, that they're making the accusation that these protesters, these women's rights protesters, and the Nazis are all together and they're all working together and whatever. Like, that kind of makes sense in the sense that that's what they would say, right? This is their opposition. They just view everyone as a Nazi, right? Even when I was walking around, these people would walk up to me and call me a Nazi, right? Just for the mere fact of being there and filming this stuff, right? And I'm filming everything that's happening. I don't care. I'm just filming what's happening. If you don't agree with them 100%, you're a Nazi, right? So I'm not surprised that they're calling these women Nazis. But what I am surprised about is the politicians and the media, right? And when I say politicians, I don't mean Daniel Andrews, right? He's a part of this socialist left, far left, kind of all this kind of stuff, right? But the media, they have a duty to be balanced, and they've misrepresented these women, right? These mothers, these daughters, right? These sisters, nieces, right? Think about your own grandmother, whatever it is, right? These women, they're talking about what they feel. Now, whether they're right or wrong, that's up for everyone to decide on whatever merits that they're saying their arguments. But the fact is, women in this country, women in Australia, should be allowed to get together and advocate for their rights, right? If trans men want to have a counter protest and do this stuff, sure, they can do that in Australia as well. Should they infiltrate? No, they shouldn't be infiltrating those spaces, because if women infiltrated their space during one of their rallies and tried to steal a mic and stuff, they would be saying, "Oh, it's so unsafe. These people are so crazy. They're Nazis for coming into our space," right? This is crazy stuff. But what I am concerned about is the Liberal Party leadership, right? Liberal Party leadership in Victoria, then buying into all this stuff, right? Either they're like idiots, all right? They're just like totally unaware of, the situational surrounding of how these things come about, or they know and they're actually actively participating in defaming people, or this kind of thing that they're doing by calling these women Nazis. Because the way that they're characterizing this event, and the way that they're characterizing a member of their own team, right? Moira Deming, this MP that was there speaking again on behalf of her Muslim friend who was too afraid to be there to speak about her concerns about women's rights in this country. The fact that they are framing these people as extremists, as Nazis, by that very claim, is very concerning. And they've just taken all this stuff hook, line, and sinker. I think they're just like, I personally believe that they're just they know what they're doing, and that's even worse than them just being stupid, right? They actually know that there's no validity to any of this, and that is evidenced by mind-blowing stuff that this leader of the Liberal Party, John Pesito, whatever his name is, was referring to Wikipedia articles about some of the speakers to infer that they are far right or connected to Nazis and all this kind of stuff, right? Wikipedia pages of all things are politicians referring to Wikipedia, right? If you know anything about Wikipedia, it is so manipulated. And when this question was actually put to one of the ladies who was said that, you know, she had met this Nazi and that Nazi, she denied it. She said, "I've never done that. The Wikipedia page has been edited," and she can't remove those things, and that's just how it is. So this is the state that we are in this country, and our state is a basket case, right? What I saw that day was just like a basket case of craziness. And, you know, we are perhaps the protest capital of the country. I think we are. And you had that chaos that day in the streets of Melbourne. And so many people have been put into this one basket, when the reality is, you know, there's so many different things going on. And these eggs should be separated sometimes, even though ideologically they might be opposed to the same groups for certain issues. To create links like this, which didn't exist on the day, to create these links and associate these men that came to hijack, right? Quite frankly, to hijack the women's rights protest for their own purposes. They did that and they left. And just on finishing, in terms of Victoria Police's involvement in all of this, I mean, Victoria Police, I think personally that day, they just did whatever's best for them. And whatever they thought that day, what was best for them was just to avoid any type of brawl between these groups. If it made the women look bad that they pushed the Nazis closer to them, they didn't care, right? If it made the trans people and the trans rights activists intimidated that they let the Nazis parade in front of them, you know, doing the salute, they didn't care, right? What they wanted was to just sanitize that area, move people away from each other, and not really take any position on anything. And I think at the end of it all, you know, what I believe Victoria Police should have done is to protect that women's rights rally. I think it was very wrong of them, just regardless of the situation, to allow those men near them, right, to do those poses and to do those things that they did around them, and let them into that space so easily. You know, they were playing the police like a fiddle, and the police just went along with it. And, you know, now they're talking about changing laws and about salutes and all this kind of stuff. I don't think these people will particularly care. But look, that's not really the main focus of this issue. It's just really around the portrayal of these women as extremists and Nazis. And I think it's sick that in today's day and age in Australia, that women can't get together, discuss these issues, talk about their rights without being called extremists and Nazis by our media and political class. Thanks for watching the video, guys. If you missed the live stream, you can still watch it on my Facebook in full, and on Twitter and on Instagram. I've got some of the snippets there to watch as well. See you all next time.